So deep learning, I guess many of you come to this lecture, this course because of your interest in deep learning, which is really a hot topic nowadays. So when we talk about deep learning, we will think about what is shallow and what is deep. Actually, they do call some method, or all the methods we have talked about so far, they call all of them are shallow. They are shallow learning method. So why they call them as shallow? I think there are two reasons. Calling them shallow does not mean that they are easy. They are really deep. They have really deep theory. But they are shallow in the sense that they only involve with only one or few layers of computation. Like in the neural network, they only have one hidden layer or at most two hidden layers in the traditional neural network study. So this is shallow. In support vector machine, it's only one layer of the kernel computation and then another layer of summing them together. And if you use a feature discriminant or logistic regression or whatever, so these are shallow in the sense that they only involve one or few layers of computation. By the way, when we talk about deep learning, we are talking mostly about the supervised learning tasks. And another reason they call it shallow, to me, I think this is my understanding. So most people understand it in this way, but my understanding is that they are shallow in the sense that only the classifier is learning. So in this whole diagram, we get the original data and we do the feature extraction and feature selection, and we let the machine to learn how to classify them. We train the machine, and then we make a prediction. So we focus on this part. We assume that the features are ready when we are talking about the support vector machine or neural network or logistic regression or whatever. Of course, there are studies about feature extraction and selection, but they are taken as another task we have to do before we do the classification. So only the classifiers are learning, and not the features. In deep learning, they try to include this feature part in this circle. They learn them together. So this is the diagram for machine learning, as I shown. In most of the textbooks, people will use this. We do the classification or prediction based on features. But for deep learning, I modify it slightly from the features we get it from the original input. They may be features, they may not be features. So we use multiple layers of learning or multiple compositions of the learning machine to find not only the classification, but also first we find that we want to learn the representation of the data. The representation, from the representation is we get the features, and then we can do machine learning on that. So this is what deep means to me. So actually, people think about that. They call it deep learning because they want to do that. For example, when we see this picture, we can get the understanding from this picture that a group of people shopping at an outdoor market. They want a machine to do that. So there must be multiple layers of information processing from this to that. And the deep, they think that for the human, when we do this task, it's quite easy because we have multiple layers of information processing in our neural system to reach from these original pixels to this understanding of the image. So the machine learning, they want to invent this deep neural network to mimic our ability to get this understanding. So that's how they proposed the idea of deep neural network. So then let's make it deep from the original neural network to a really complicated a deep neural network. And actually, this is what people have tried at the early time. But soon people realize that this kind of a the completely connected deep neural network cannot work. So it performs very poorly on image analysis tasks and other tasks. There can be many reasons. One reason is that there are too many. When we have too many layers, we will have too many parameters to learn. And to learn those many parameters, we will have much more data are needed. At the early days, we don't have much more data, but now we have much more data. We have the big data, we have many data, but still there are problems. The learning can be very slow. And also, there will be many local optima in your in your objective function. You will be easily trapped in some local optima that is not good. And also, remember that how we learn this network, we get the gradient of the error at the output. We gradually broadcast the error message back to all the weights. We can imagine that when we have many layers, the gradient will diffuse. The gradient will be very small when it is distributed this long way to all the parameters here. So it will be very hard to learn. And also from the image side, if we want to the input is the image, so we know that their image they have organizations, spatial organizations in the information. They are not independent pixels. This design does not take into consideration of this dependence. And also, when people see a picture and get understanding, we have hierarchical understanding. Like we first get where are the edges and colors, and then we get from that we get the understanding of what are vegetable and people, and then so on and so forth. So this hierarchical representation cannot be got from this. I call it the naive deep neural network. So fortunately, people invented other designs of the neural network. A very successful design is the so-called convolutional neural network, or CNN. CNN is not the TV news that always tells biased stories. So it's a convolutional neural network in this context. So CNN is one type of deep neural network. Then how it solves the problems I have listed of the deep neural network? The idea that it used to solve the problem is that they use the localized connection instead of a fully connected neural network. And they use the shared weights to reduce the number of weights that need to be trained. And they use the sampling also to reduce the number of weights and also to introduce the hierarchical feature extraction. I will explain what these ideas mean. This is the typical architecture of the CNN. The most famous CNN, also the earliest CNN, is named as LeNet. So from the original, from the input image, we first have a convolution layer. That is, in this layer, we will have several small filters. Like this one is a small filter applying on only a localized region of the image. And we apply the filter on this part of the image, we get an output here. So this procedure is called convolution. And we have multiple filters here. We get multiple layers, a stack of layers at this layer. And then we do a sampling from this to a lower dimensional space. And we, based on this space, using this layer as the input, we can do another layer of convolution of the same idea, but at a lower dimension, and repeat this. We can have multiple iterations. And then finally, we have a fully connected multiple layer perceptron. That is the standard neural network. So this is the basic procedure. Let's go into the details one layer by one layer. So the convolution is the process of you apply one function on another function. That is so here is simply we have a filter. Suppose it's 3 by 3. We just the filter is a weighted sum of all the pixels. We get the weighted sum of all the pixels. This is H is the suppose H is the pixel value, and K is the weight, or vice versa. And we get the weighted sum. We get this convolution result, and then we move this filter by 1 pixel or some other, or 2 or multiple pixels. We get another output. So by scanning the filter across this image, we get an output. And let's simplify this illustration in a one-dimensional case. So suppose this is the input, one-dimensional input. We have a filter of 3 nodes. So this is the sum of these 3 nodes. These 3 pixels give the output of this node, this next layer. And the sum of we move the filter 1 step, and we get the output here, And from this, the next step, we get sum them again. This convolution layer is only about this part. This part, what we call the shared width, is that when we move the filter, when we scan the filter by moving it 1 step, we don't change the weight. So the weights of this computation and this computation and this computation, they are same. So we have only 3 weights of this at this step. So in this way, we have the local connectivity, and also we have shared weights. We reduce the number of weights we need to learn. And to capture more properties of the original input, we typically introduce several different filters. So we call it several different neurons. So so at each layer we actually we don't have instead of have only 1 layer of neurons, we have multiple layer of outputs at each convolution layer. So the filtering is a linear operation. Usually it is followed by a nonlinear processing to make the computation more efficient. The most popular one is the so-called ReLU function. That is a rectified linear unit. It's a function like this. So it's make it smooth. So after applying the filtering, we introduce a nonlinear operation on this output to get this node. Right. So we get this. Now we from this original space we get this into to this layer. This layer, note that the dimension can be higher than the original dimension because we have multiple stacks of the filters. And the next we do the sampling to kind of down sampling from this layer to the next layer. This is simply done by a operation that is so-called max pooling. So the idea is this. So we want to downsample from this layer to this layer, and the operation is that we use just in this neighborhood the maximum value in this neighborhood as output here. So we just get the output, the highest the value of a certain neighborhood as the value for the next layer, next step. In this way, we reduce the dimension, and there is an assumption that is that at this layer, each filter somehow extracts some feature in the original image, and the feature can be strong or weak. So we just find the strongest feature in a certain neighborhood, and we don't care about whether the strongest feature happens here or here or here. So this introduces some translational invariance in this step, and also we reduce the dimension. This is the sampling layer, and we can, using this as the input, because this is also, you can take it as an image, and then we can have another layer of convolution and sampling and so on and so forth. So after that, we get what we get from these multiple layers of convolution and sampling is a set of features that somehow represent the original image, because it is derived from the original image. So at the end, we add either a multiple layer perceptron, the original neural network, or another simpler function as the Softmax. We have talked about multiple layer perceptron in the last lecture, so let's look at it. What is Softmax? Softmax is easier than the MLP. It's just a normalized exponential function, or a generalization of logistic function, in the sense that they have multiple logistic functions, but they are normalized to sum of 1. So that is this is the Softmax. The X is the feature, and you take this exponential and normalize it as the outputs of this, and with this we can calculate error at this output or at the MLP, and we can calculate the gradient using this, and for the MLP and also the same thing. And so remember that we have gone through multiple layers of process, but we didn't tell what are the filters and what are the weights. So they are all initiated with small random numbers, and we get at the output we can calculate the error, and then we can use the backpropagation algorithm to train all the parameters. Yeah, this is what they done for the CNN. So the basic the training algorithm is still the BP algorithm applied on this. There are some slight modifications because of the shared weights strategy. So, but the basic idea is the same. So some examples of the successful application of CNN. The first successful application is on the digits recognition. We can see that these are some benchmark data sets. We can see this is the best result of other methods, and the accuracy, this is the percentage accuracy. And this is what the multiple convolution deep neural network got. So they got significant improvement from other methods. So this is a specific structure used in this paper. They just from the original image, they have multiple filters. They have this convolution layer and max pooling, another set of filters, another convolution layer. So the dimension at first increase and then decrease, and at the output they have a fully connected multi-layer perceptron. They have multiple outputs, 10 outputs, and representing 10 of the digits. And another example is the image understanding. So this is the structure. I will not go through it in the details. So there are 2 plus I want to show. So one is in this experiment they compare this the rectified linear unit with the sigmoid function. So if you use the sigmoid function, the learning curve is like this. This is error. This is the learn training. And with the rectified the ReLU function, they have a much better training speed. So that's why the ReLU became popular. And this figure shows what are the features that the layers learned. This is of some of the middle layer, the representation of the middle layer. We can say that each middle layer is after training, it somehow captures, I mean each node in the middle layer somehow captures a particular feature in the original image. This like the edges in a particular direction and some other direction of some other feature, some colored feature, so on and so forth. They applied this on understanding the images. They have some labeling, multiple labeling actually, on what this picture is about. And also they apply it on understanding what this picture is and finding the similar pictures in the database. It's performed pretty well. And these are the examples that made this method popular. And people have adopted the same method for the medical applications, like in the CT image. They build a similar CNN model to learn to how to identify the boundary of a pancreas from the CT image. These are the performance they have identified. We can see it's pretty good. And also in this year, in the last year, so there is a very famous paper that is called DeepBind. They built a deep learning neural network based on the protein binding data from ChIP-seq and other experiments. They collected huge number of sequences that are experimentally verified as protein binding or TF binding or some other sequences. They collected all of them as the training data, built a large-scale data set, and they built a CNN model using, because the data is huge, so they use the GPU to train the model. And then after they train the model, they can predict, given any sequence, they can predict gene regulation and binding sites. And also, if there is a mutation in some patients, they can evaluate how risk the mutation is according to this the change to this binding motif, the predicted binding motif. This is the structure of their deep neural network. They get a group of training data, the DNA sequences. They use the convolution layer and rectify it using ReLU and use the pooling, the subsampling, and they use only one round of this convolution rectify pooling, and then they use a fully connected neural network, the MLP, and you use the target as the training and use the backpropagation to update the parameters in this model. And these are some details. And it's so we can imagine that although this CNN have reduced the number of parameters from the fully connected network, but still there are many parameters, right? So because there are many layers, there are many parameters to be learned. So we can imagine that to train this neural network, we need a really huge amount of samples. They really collected a huge amount of. They collected 12 terabytes of sequences, of DNA sequences. By collecting thousands of published tape-seq and other experiments. And with this, they have successfully built almost 1,000 models for different TF binding and RNA binding proteins, and built almost 1,000 models for the precision medicine application. And these pictures shows that they evaluated the method comparing with some other methods. Of course, their methods in red are the best one. I will skip this. And they using the predict motif. Basically, their method gives a full prediction of all various kind of motifs. And then they can check for each genomic variation. They can check how severe the variation can destroy the motif, and they can evaluate the disease risk. These are some examples. They can successfully identify the disease-causing SNPs. And there is another impressive work also in the last year, October of 2015. A similar idea, almost the same structure. The method is called DeepC. That is for the non-coding variants. They get from the sequence. What they get from the sequence, if you apply a sequence to their trained model, they can give you a score about the DHS, the DNA hypersensitive motif and TF binding motif or histone markers in this sequence. This is also obtained by using a huge amount of training data on this deep convolutional neural network. And from there, they have a server. You provide some sequence input, and they give you the score of the output. So, any question for this part? Yeah.
So, it looks like, it's really great that the deep learning works, but beginning earlier processing Python is really important, like how you get from the input to the kind of the intermediate level of feature,
right.
And after that you can use like energy.
Yeah.
So this earlier part really need very specific determination of what kind of way that you are going to contribute, what kind of way that you are going to select, and so on. So like this sounds like, and it sounds like a lot of work done for image analysis.
Right.
People may have some standard for the image analysis.
Yeah.
But for gene expression.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Actually, sorry. So almost all the successful applications of this method in artificial intelligence like this are on images. For images, we have, we humans have very good understanding on their local structure. So they can design the thing in this. And later they have applied on the natural language processing. Also, we have good understanding on the natural language because we speak the natural language. But again, for the most of the biological information, we don't really have good understanding. So that's why people are kind of slow in applying this deep learning technique to the biological case. But for these applications, they have, so for the biological applications, relatively we have more understanding on the DNA sequence motifs. So this is why they succeeded on finding the DNA motifs, because they are kind of locally connected patterns. Of course, I guess there must be some good trial and errors as to how to design the structure. So why they collect the 5 sequence segments as the input together. So there are some trial and errors and many failures. So this is a challenge. So it's not easy. We will discuss that at the end. So currently, people have some successful applications on the DNA sequence, where we know some local information. But for other data, it's up to us to explore how can we get the local information. Any other question? So